My name is Graham Whitaker, I'm 52 years old, and I live in Cleveland, Ohio. For more than 2 decades, I worked as a warehouse supervisor at North Shore Freight Lines. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady, good, honest work that kept the lights on and food on the table. My son, Caleb, was 24 when he died. Just getting his footing in life, working as a dispatcher at Lakefront Hauling Company, proud of his first big job. He called me every Sunday night, no matter what, just to check in. He'd ask for advice on little things like handling tough coworkers or fixing the squeak in his old Ford. And my ex-wife, Sharon, she used to be the center of my world. We met in our 20s, got married young, and built a life piece by piece. For years, I thought we were solid. Sure, she had big dreams, always talking about more, bigger houses, newer cars, vacations that cost more than our yearly salary, but I never imagined she'd destroy everything for it. Before I tell you my complete story, subscribe and comment where you're watching from. I'd love to know how far this story travels. Sharon worked as a real estate broker, dressed sharp, spoke sharper. Auburn hair, those green eyes that once looked at me with warmth now just showed quiet disappointment. My brother, Dean, ran a small auto shop on the west side of town. He was 3 years older, tougher, and single by choice. Cars don't lie, he used to say. People do. Dean loved Caleb like his own son. He taught him to rebuild an engine, cheered for him at every football game, and cried harder than anyone when the police showed up at my door that night. The day everything fell apart was the day of the trial. The courtroom was packed. Sharon was at the plaintiff's table wearing a black dress that probably cost a month of my pay. She looked the part, broken widow, trembling hands, the picture of grief. Her lawyer, Malcolm Avery, was one of those billboard attorneys who promised justice and big checks. He wore a designer suit, his smile too smooth to trust. Your Honor, he began, his voice ringing through the courtroom, Graham Whitaker's negligence as a father directly contributed to his son's death. He raised Caleb to believe that shortcuts were acceptable, that safety was secondary to speed. Then Sharon took the stand. Her voice cracked just enough to sound rehearsed. You killed him, Graham, she said, pointing straight at me. You killed our boy. You taught him that rules didn't matter, and he died because of you. Every word tore me apart. I had spent my career preaching safety, writing up guys for skipping gear, firing workers for breaking protocol. But Sharon had witnesses, 3 of my former coworkers, who swore I'd said and done things I never had. The gavel came down like thunder. The court finds in favor of the plaintiff. The full $800,000 life insurance payout, along with all marital assets, will be awarded to Mrs. Sharon Whitaker. I lost everything that day. The house. The savings. My name. The Cleveland Gazette ran a headline the next morning. Father's negligence blamed for son's death. I became a pariah overnight, the man who killed his own son. 3 months later, I was living in Caleb's old apartment, because it was the only place that still felt like home. I used to just sit there, surrounded by his things, the coffee mug by the sink, his jacket still hanging by the door, his cologne faint in the air. On the 3rd night, I decided to clean his room. I pulled his sheets, lifted the mattress, and saw something wedged deep against the wall, a metal lockbox, dusty and locked tight. My heart started pounding. It wasn't just curiosity, it was instinct. Something about it felt important. I tried combinations, his birthday, his phone number, our old address. Nothing worked. Then I remembered the day he learned to ride his bike, July 14, 2007. He'd fallen 6 times, then shouted, "Dad! Did you see me go?" Click. The lock opened. Inside were neat stacks of cash, $250,000 in hundreds. Beneath that were 6 flash drives, each labeled with dates from the months before his death. And at the very bottom, a handwritten envelope that simply said, "Dad." I opened it with shaking hands. "Dad, if you're reading this, I'm gone. They'll make it look like an accident. The money's from them, I took it as insurance. The drives have everything. Start with the first one. Use it to clear your name. I'm sorry I didn't listen. I love you. Make them pay." My blood ran cold. Whatever happened to my son, it wasn't an accident. And whoever they were, my ex-wife, her lawyer, his company, Caleb had uncovered something massive. That night, I turned on my old laptop, inserted the first flash drive, and opened the first folder. And what I saw on the screen made my stomach twist. Because Caleb had been investigating something at Lakefront Hauling Company, and he had uncovered evidence that reached far beyond his death. I sat in Caleb's dark apartment, laptop glowing against the quiet, my hands trembling as I opened that first flash drive. The folder was dated 3 months before his death, and inside were files named things like routes, transfers, Newcomb_call1, and warehouse footage. The first video looked like dashcam footage from one of the company trucks. The timestamp read 2:43 a.m. It showed the truck pulling into an abandoned freight yard on the outskirts of Cleveland, far off the official route. 3 black vans were waiting there. Men got out, started moving unmarked boxes from the truck into the vans. The boxes weren't on any manifest. I clicked the next video. Different location. Same pattern. The 3rd, 4th, and 5th showed it again and again. Nighttime transfers. Same trucks. Same faces. My son had been documenting illegal cargo runs, shipments that never existed on paper. Then came an audio file. My heart pounded as I clicked play. "The new kid in dispatch is asking too many questions," said a deep voice. I recognized it instantly, Frank Newman, Caleb's supervisor. Another voice replied, calmer, colder. "Handle it. Quietly. We can't afford exposure right now." That second voice? I froze. It wasn't Frank's. It was Malcolm Avery, my ex-wife's lawyer. I paused the file and stared at the screen. My mind spun. What was a divorce attorney doing talking about trucking routes and exposure? I opened another file, an Excel sheet. Caleb had listed truck numbers, drivers' names, routes, timestamps, and what looked like estimated street values of shipments. Millions of dollars were being moved off-book every month. He discovered a drug trafficking operation hidden behind legitimate freight routes. I leaned back in Caleb's old chair, my pulse pounding. He'd been in over his head. Way over. Then came another folder, this one named Home. There were photos. My stomach dropped as I recognized them, my living room, our old kitchen, even the porch. Hidden camera angles. One video file was labeled Mom_1. I hesitated before clicking. But I had to. The footage was from 2 weeks before Caleb's death. It showed Sharon, sitting on our couch, talking to Malcolm Avery. She was calm, too calm. A half-empty bottle of wine sat on the table. "The insurance policy is $800,000, Malcolm said smoothly. "Once your son has his accident, we file for divorce. You'll win on negligence," his father taught him everything. Sharon looked at him and asked, "You're sure Caleb won't suffer?" "It'll be fast," Malcolm promised. "A loading dock failure. His father takes the blame. You get the money, we disappear." Sharon hesitated, then said, "And Graham? What about him?" Malcolm smiled. "We'll leave him alive. Broken. Everyone will believe he killed his son." Then she laughed. A sound I'll never forget. Cold, bitter, cruel. That's when I slammed my laptop shut and stumbled back in my chair, gasping for air. My wife, the woman I'd loved for half my life, had been part of my son's murder. For money. I sat there in silence, the only sound the radiator hissing behind me. My whole world had shifted. The woman who ruined me in court hadn't just destroyed my reputation, she'd killed our son to do it. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Caleb's face, that last breakfast we shared at Murphy's Diner. "Dad, if anything happens to me, I want you to know I'm proud of you." Now I knew what he'd meant. He'd known something was coming. The next morning, I drove straight to Dean's auto shop. He took one look at me and said, "What happened? You look like hell." "I found something," I whispered. Caleb, he knew. I told him everything, the cash, the drives, the files. When I got to the part about Sharon and Malcolm, Dean's hands clenched around a wrench until his knuckles turned white. "Those two are gonna rot," he muttered. "You still got those drives?" "All 6, I said, pulling the bag from my jacket. Caleb said to start with the oldest one. Dean stared at me for a long time. "Graham, you can't handle this alone. You need to go to the FBI." "I will," I said quietly. "But I need to see everything first." We sat side by side in his shop's back office and plugged in the second flash drive. More spreadsheets, more recordings, this time emails between company executives, coded messages that referenced deliveries and north route adjustments. It was all evidence. Every file screamed corruption. Then came a recording labeled Plan_B. I hit play. Frank's voice again. "The kid's suspicious. He's comparing manifests." Malcolm replied, "If he talks, we're done. Make it look like an accident. Use the damaged container. Make sure the father's fingerprints are all over it." Dean covered his mouth. "Jesus Christ, Graham. They planned the whole thing." "Keep listening," I said. "Frank, and the mother?" "Malcolm, she'll get her payout. She's already agreed to testify that Graham taught him unsafe habits." "Frank, cold woman." "Malcolm, greed makes people loyal." I paused the audio and leaned back, feeling my stomach twist. Caleb had heard this. He'd been collecting proof, risking his life. And they silenced him for it. That night, Dean made me crash on his couch. I didn't argue. I couldn't face the apartment again. Every time I thought about the lockbox, I saw Caleb's handwriting, "Make them pay." When I woke up, I made a decision. I drove to the Cleveland FBI field office on Lakeside Avenue. I told the agent at the front desk I had evidence of a corporate murder conspiracy. At first, she looked skeptical, until I showed her one of the flash drives. Within an hour, 2 agents, Patricia Greer and Marcus Cole, were sitting with me in an interview room. They reviewed the first drive in silence. When the video of Sharon and Malcolm played, Patricia shut her laptop slowly and looked at me. "Mr. Whitaker, this is serious federal evidence. Your son built a case that could take down a major criminal network." I nodded numbly. "He died for it." They kept the drives, promised to review every file through the night. When I left the building, the morning sun was barely rising over Lake Erie, but it felt cold, like the city itself had turned its back. By evening, the agents called. "Mr. Whitaker, we're moving fast. Stay available. We'll need you tomorrow." The next day, at dawn, the arrests began. 17 people, drivers, executives, and even Frank Newman, were taken into custody. The FBI raided the lakefront hauling office, seizing records, trucks, and millions in narcotics hidden in false compartments. And Malcolm Avery? He tried to run. Got as far as Hopkins International Airport before they caught him with fake passports and a ticket to Brazil. But Sharon, she'd vanished. The FBI suspected she'd crossed into Mexico. And when they found her, what came next would make headlines across the nation. Because my wife hadn't just killed our son. She'd tried to erase me. And thanks to Caleb's courage, she was about to face everything she'd built her life escaping, the truth. The morning after the raids, I barely recognized my own reflection. The man staring back from the mirror looked hollow, like the life had been drained out of him. The FBI had called at sunrise. They'd arrested almost everyone connected to the operation. Everyone except Sharon. Agent Greer's voice over the phone was firm but calm. "Mr. Whitaker, your wife is on the move. We believe she crossed into Mexico late last night. We're coordinating with local authorities." I hung up and just sat there for a while, staring at Caleb's lockbox. The metal edges caught the morning light from the window. That box had burned my world down, but it had also given me something I hadn't felt in months: purpose. Dean stopped by the apartment with breakfast from Murphy's Diner, same as we used to do with Caleb every Sunday. He handed me a paper bag and a cup of black coffee. "Eat something," he said. "You're no good to anyone if you pass out." I nodded, though I didn't feel hungry. "They're going after her," I said quietly. "They found her." Dean sat beside me, staring at the floor. "Good. She deserves worse than prison." The following week felt like one long blur. The FBI agents called me daily for follow-ups, interviews, cross-checks. I sat in a cold room with a government laptop as they combed through every file Caleb had collected. Agent Cole looked up from his screen one evening and said, "Mr. Whitaker, your son's work here, it's extraordinary." He documented everything. Ledger trails, internal emails, coded transfers. He even predicted how they'd cover it up. "Yeah," I said softly. "He got that from me. Always said details matter." 2 days later, they called again. "Mr. Whitaker," Agent Greer said. "We got her." I froze. "Where?" "Playa del Carmen, Mexico." She was living under the name Jennifer Morris. She was staying at a resort, with one of Malcolm Avery's associates, a man named Dennis Vale. The local authorities picked her up during a spa treatment. She's being extradited. I don't know what I felt then. Relief? Anger? Grief? Probably all three. For months, I'd been numb. But that morning, something in me stirred again, a quiet flame of justice. When Sharon landed back in the U.S. in handcuffs, every news station in Ohio covered it. Local woman accused in son's murder conspiracy. Real estate agent and lawyer orchestrate fatal scheme. Reporters called me nonstop. I didn't answer. I didn't want my face on TV. I didn't want fame. I just wanted the truth to finish what Caleb started. The trial began 6 months later in Cuyahoga County Courthouse. I sat in the front row every day, Dean at my side. Sharon walked in wearing a beige prison uniform, her auburn hair now dull and flat. She looked smaller somehow, like all that ambition and arrogance had finally run out of fuel. Across from her sat Malcolm Avery, wearing an orange jumpsuit and the same smug grin that made my fists clench. The prosecutor, Helen Donovan, was sharp and merciless. She laid everything out for the jury like a slow knife twist: the recordings, the financial evidence, the murder plot, the insurance fraud, the fake witnesses. When they played the recording of Sharon and Malcolm planning Caleb's accident, the entire courtroom went silent. The video showed her smiling, sipping wine, nodding along as Malcolm said, "Your husband will take the blame. You'll be rich and free." Then that laugh, cold and cruel, filled the courtroom. Sharon buried her face in her hands, sobbing. But it was too late. Everyone had heard it. Everyone had seen the truth. Dean leaned toward me. "You good?" he whispered. "I'm fine," I said, but my throat tightened. I just want her to see what she did. Next came the testimony from those three coworkers, Jerry Watts, Monica Flores, and Rick Polson, the same people who'd lied under oath during the civil suit. But this time, they weren't lying. They were shaking. Each admitted they'd been paid off by Malcolm to fabricate stories about me. $50,000 apiece to ruin my life. Jerry broke down crying on the stand. He said it was just to help a grieving mother, he sobbed. I didn't know they were behind Caleb's death. I swear I didn't. The courtroom gasped. Sharon wouldn't even look up. When it was Malcolm's turn, his arrogance cracked. He tried to smirk through the prosecutor's questions, but once the FBI played a recording of him ordering Caleb's death, his face went gray. "Prosecutor, Mr. Avery, is this your voice saying, make sure the father's fingerprints are all over it?" Malcolm, I don't recall. Prosecutor, play it again. The words echoed across the courtroom, and this time, he didn't even try to deny it. When the verdicts came, it was swift. Malcolm Avery, guilty on all counts, racketeering, conspiracy, first-degree murder. Sharon Whitaker, guilty of accessory to murder, insurance fraud, and perjury. The three witnesses, guilty of perjury and obstruction. The judge's gavel fell like thunder. Mr. Avery is hereby sentenced to death by lethal injection. Mrs. Whitaker, life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. I didn't move. Didn't cheer. Didn't cry. I just sat there, staring at her. She turned once before they took her away. Our eyes met. For a second, I thought I saw the woman I used to know, the young dreamer I'd fallen in love with. But that illusion vanished the moment she whispered, "I'm sorry." And I whispered back, "You're 24 years too late." Outside, reporters crowded the steps, shouting questions, flashing cameras. Dean stood next to me like a bodyguard. "Say something for the cameras, Graham," one called out. "How does it feel to finally be vindicated?" I looked at them, the city skyline behind them glinting in the sunset, and said quietly, "Justice isn't victory. It's just balance." Then I walked away. In the weeks that followed, the FBI returned the $800,000 insurance payout to me, along with a civil settlement for damages. In total, I received just under $2 million. But none of it mattered. Money couldn't bring Caleb back. Instead, I used it for him. For what he believed in. Dean and I founded the Caleb Whitaker Foundation, a non-profit that helps families fight wrongful accusations and supports whistleblowers in dangerous workplaces. The second initiative, funded by Caleb's secret $250,000 stash, became the Whitaker Center for Workplace Integrity, offering free training on identifying corruption and reporting it safely. 2 years later, we'd already exposed 4 criminal rings across the Midwest. Each time, I thought about Caleb, how his bravery kept echoing long after he was gone. At Sharon's sentencing hearing, she asked to speak to me privately. The guards brought her in, her wrists shackled, her voice small. "Graham," she whispered, "I was blinded by greed. I thought it would be quick. I never meant for Caleb to die. Please, forgive me." I stared at her for a long time. Then I said, "He died believing in truth, Sharon. You killed the best part of both of us. I'll never forgive you, but I'll make sure people remember him, not you." She cried as they took her away. I didn't feel pity. Only peace. Now, every Sunday, Dean and I visit Caleb's grave. We bring 3 breakfasts from Murphy's, one for him. We sit there, drink our coffee, and tell him what's new. Some days I swear I can feel him there, that steady calm presence. My son, the man who uncovered the truth, faced death, and still thought of others before himself. He didn't just save my name. He saved countless lives. He became what I always wanted him to be, a man of integrity. A year had passed since the trial, and Cleveland finally felt quiet again. The endless news coverage faded, the calls from reporters stopped, and the world moved on. But for me, time moved differently, slow and heavy, like wading through a memory you can't escape. Every morning I woke up in the same small apartment, the one that used to belong to Caleb. His lockbox sat on my shelf, empty now, but I couldn't bring myself to put it away. It reminded me of how truth had survived inside that box, how my son had planned for everything, even his own death. Dean came by most mornings, sometimes just to have coffee, other times to talk business about the foundation. We'd moved operations into a small office space near West 25th Street, a modest setup with a flickering fluorescent light and a leaky ceiling, but it was enough. Our nonprofit, the Caleb Whitaker Foundation, had started small, just the 2 of us and a retired paralegal named Margie. Within months, families from all over Ohio were reaching out. Workers who'd been framed by corporations, truckers who'd been threatened for speaking out, and parents who'd lost children in accidents that didn't add up. Caleb's name was becoming something bigger than tragedy, it was becoming hope. One afternoon, a young man came into the office. He looked nervous, clutching a folder like it was made of glass. "Are you Mr. Whitaker?" he asked. "That's me," I said. "How can we help you?" He set the folder down and whispered, "I think my company's shipping illegal cargo." Dean and I exchanged a look. It felt like déjà vu. The same quiet courage I'd seen in my son now stood in front of me, trembling but determined. We helped him file a report with the Department of Transportation. 6 months later, his evidence exposed another trafficking ring, smaller, but just as dangerous. And when the story made the news, our foundation's phone didn't stop ringing. That night, I sat alone in the office long after everyone had gone home. I stared out the window at the Cleveland skyline, gray, cold, steady. For the first time in a long time, I felt peace. My son hadn't died in vain. Before I tell you my complete story, subscribe and comment where you're watching from. I'd love to know how far this story travels. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about making sure no one else suffered the way we did. Still, the nightmares never fully stopped. Some nights I'd wake up drenched in sweat, hearing Caleb's voice calling out, "Dad, they know." But instead of fear, I felt something else now, resolve. I visited his grave every Sunday without fail. Dean always came, carrying 3 paper bags from Murphy's Diner. It became a ritual. We'd sit by the headstone, drink our coffee, and talk like he was still sitting right there with us. Sometimes, kids from the local high school would walk by and wave. One of them, a girl named Lila, once stopped and asked, "Mister, is that your son?" "Yeah," I said softly. "He was the bravest man I've ever known." She nodded and said, "My teacher told us about him. We had to write essays on heroes. I picked him." That night, I cried for the first time in months. Not out of grief this time, but pride. A few weeks later, the Whitaker Center for Workplace Integrity opened its doors downtown. We partnered with state officials to create training programs for safety compliance and whistleblower protection. It was funded entirely by Caleb's secret $250,000, the same money he'd stolen from the people who killed him. Poetic justice, Dean called it. Every wall in that center had a quote from Caleb's letter engraved on it. "If you're reading this, fight back." The day we unveiled the plaque, a local news crew showed up. The reporter asked, "Mr. Whitaker, what would your son say if he could see this today?" I smiled sadly and said, "He'd probably say, 'Took you long enough, old man.'" Everyone laughed. But I meant it. As months went by, I started speaking at community events, high schools, and trucking companies. I told Caleb's story, not for pity, but as a warning. Truth costs, I'd say, standing behind the microphone. But lies cost more. People listened. Some cried. Others came forward after the talks, whispering things like, "My son's gone too," or "I think my company's hiding something." And each time, I'd hand them one of our foundation cards. "We'll help you, I'd promise." In quiet moments, I sometimes caught myself replaying that last breakfast with Caleb, the way he'd stirred his coffee, the hesitation in his voice when he said, "If anything ever happens to me." He'd known. My son had looked death in the eye and still chosen to stand for what was right. I visited Sharon once after her sentencing. Not because I wanted to, but because I needed closure. The guards led me into a sterile visitation room. She looked older than her years, gray roots showing, skin pale from fluorescent light. When she saw me, her eyes filled with tears. "You came," she whispered. "Don't flatter yourself," I said quietly. "I came for answers." She nodded, trembling. "I never thought it would go that far. Malcolm promised Caleb wouldn't die. I wanted out, Graham. I was tired of living small." "You sold your soul," I said. "And you took our son's life as payment." She looked down, her voice barely a whisper. "I know. I see him in my dreams every night. He doesn't speak. He just stares." "Good," I said. "Let him haunt you." When I stood to leave, she reached out, but I didn't take her hand. I turned and walked out without looking back. That night, I stood by Lake Erie watching the sun go down, orange fading into blue, the water restless but calm. For the first time since everything began, I felt like I could breathe. Caleb's story wasn't about death anymore. It was about courage, and how truth doesn't die with the person who finds it. As I walked home, I passed by the Whitaker Center, its windows glowing softly in the dusk. Inside, a group of young volunteers was setting up training kits, laughing, moving tables, working late, just like Caleb used to. And for a moment, I could almost hear him again. "Hey, Dad, you did good." I smiled, looking up at the sign above the door, his name in bold letters, shining under the city lights. The Caleb Whitaker Foundation for Justice. My son had left me with pain. But he'd also left me with purpose. And I intended to honor both for the rest of my life. It's been 5 years since Caleb's death. Cleveland has changed in that time, new buildings, new faces, but somehow the air feels the same. There's a stillness to this city that I've grown to love, the kind that reminds you life keeps moving even when you're stood still for a while. I still live in the same small apartment where I found the lockbox. I could move, sure, the foundation could afford to buy me a house now, but I don't want to. This place is my reminder. My son's ghost doesn't haunt it, he lives in it. His blue mug sits by the sink. His jacket still hangs on the hook by the door. Every morning, I pour my coffee into that mug, take a sip, and say, "Morning, kid." It's habit now, but it feels like a conversation that never ended. Before I tell you my complete story, subscribe and comment where you're watching from. I'd love to know how far this story travels. Dean still visits every Sunday, same as always. He's slowed down a little, his hands don't work on engines quite like they used to, but he's still got that fire in him. We meet at Murphy's Diner before heading to the cemetery, carrying 3 paper bags of breakfast. We sit by Caleb's grave, unwrap our food, and talk to him like he's right there. It's our way of keeping him part of every Sunday. Sometimes, Dean cracks jokes, sometimes, I tell him about the people we've helped that week. "Another guy called from St. Louis," I said once, biting into a slice of bacon. "He was fired for reporting illegal shipments. Said he heard about us through the Whitaker Center." Dean smiled. "Caleb's still doing his work, huh?" "Yeah," I said, staring at the headstone. He never really stopped. The foundation has grown beyond anything I imagined. We now have partnerships with trucking unions, legal aid groups, and even federal agencies. The Whitaker Scholarship Program helps kids studying criminal justice, the same field Caleb was so passionate about. Every spring, I attend the award ceremony. The students line up to receive their scholarships, all smiling and nervous, some with parents who remind me of myself, proud, anxious, full of hope. Last year, one student, a tall kid named Andre Mitchell, walked up to the podium to give his speech. He said, "I lost my dad to a warehouse accident. For years, everyone said it was his fault. But because of the Whitaker Foundation, we found out it wasn't. You gave me back my faith in people." I had to excuse myself after that. I stood outside the hall for 10 minutes just to breathe. Later that night, I visited Caleb's grave again and told him about Andre. "You're saving people, son," I whispered. "One by one. Sometimes, I wonder if forgiveness is possible. Not for Sharon, I'll never forgive what she did, but for myself. For not listening when Caleb tried to warn me that morning over breakfast. For dismissing the worry in his eyes. That's the thing about guilt, it doesn't fade, it just becomes quieter. You learn to live alongside it. A few months ago, I got a letter from the prison. It was from Sharon. I almost didn't open it, but curiosity won. Her handwriting had changed, smaller, uneven. "Graham, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even expect you to read this. I just need you to know I dream about Caleb every night. He doesn't speak. He just looks at me, and I know that's my punishment. You were right. I killed everything good in my life. Please don't waste yours hating me. Live for him. Sharon." I folded the letter, put it back in the envelope, and burned it in the sink. Some things don't deserve to be kept. But part of me understood what she meant. Caleb wouldn't want me to carry hatred forever. That night, I walked down to the Lake Erie Pier. The air was sharp, the water restless, reflecting the city lights. I closed my eyes and thought about Caleb, the way he used to call me old man, just to see me roll my eyes, how he laughed when he beat me at chess, how serious he looked the morning he told me, "If anything happens to me." I whispered into the wind, "You did good, son." And for the first time, I swear I felt a breeze brush against my shoulder, warm and gentle, like a hand saying, "I know." These days, I tell our story whenever I can, at schools, trucking companies, union meetings, even churches. I stand in front of strangers and talk about courage, truth, and how sometimes the people you trust most are the ones who bury the knife deepest. I tell them how a young man in Cleveland uncovered a conspiracy bigger than himself, and died to make sure others would live. And I end every talk the same way. My son didn't die because he made a mistake. He died because he did the right thing. And if that's the price of integrity, then it's worth it. The audience always stands. Sometimes they cry. Sometimes they come up afterward and hug me. But the best part is when someone whispers, "Your son's story changed my life." That's when I know Caleb's still here. A few weeks ago, I went back to his old apartment. The landlord was renovating, turning it into a rental. I asked if I could look inside one last time. He agreed. The walls were bare, the carpet torn out, but when I stood there in the doorway, I saw it all again, the night I found that lockbox, the dust on the floor, the way my hands shook as I opened it. That was the night I thought my world had ended. But really, it was the night it began again. Caleb gave me the truth. And with it, he gave me a second chance at life. As I left the apartment, I ran my fingers along the doorframe and whispered, "Thank you." Now, every time I pass by the Whitaker Center downtown, I see the lights still glowing through the glass, young people inside, learning, working, building something honest. That's his legacy. Not money. Not revenge. But truth. The kind that doesn't scream for attention. The kind that stands quietly, even when the world looks away. And that's the kind of justice my son believed in. Would you have done the same? Tell me in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this one.